Hello, my name is Capri Bell Salam, and for today's training, we are going to be talking about the Code of Ethics for Arkansas Educators. As we are moving forward in the world and as society changes, this Code of Ethics should really be considered more as a code of conduct for teachers because we know that educators are held to a much higher standard of professionalism than most other careers. So today we're going to look at the 8 standards in the state of Arkansas. We're going to talk about the Professional Licensure Standard Board. We're going to look at some case study examples and then talk about some best practices that you as an educator can do to maintain professionalism with your students, with parents, with stakeholders, and with administrators. So hopefully today you'll find this training to be very beneficial to you. And just remember that as you are growing as an educator, that you always maintain your professionalism, that you stay grounded in your ethics, and that we always make good decisions. Because at the end of the day, we're here to support our students, to support their learning, and to keep them safe, healthy, and happy. Well, hello. Today's Code of Ethics for Arkansas Educators is brought to you by the Professional Licensure Standards Board, who have done an excellent job curating this training for us. And a little bit about our overview of what you can expect in today's training. So I'm going to tell you who the Professional Licensure and Standards Board consists of and what they do. And then we're going to talk about the 8 standards of Code of Ethics for Arkansas Educators. And then we'll have some real life case examples and best practices that you can apply in your daily life as an educator. So moving forward, we want to know, why are ethics important? Well, the perception of ethics will vary depending on the community, the school, and the individual educator. So the Arkansas Code of Ethics holds educators accountable to a high standard of professionalism, both inside and outside of the classroom. So whether you're in your classroom doing morning announcements with your students, whether you're volunteering as a chaperone at the high school prom, or you're just out and about shopping at Walmart, you are always an educator and you have to hold yourself to a higher standard, and the way you conduct yourself should always be as a professional. Moving forward, when you think of the Code of Ethics, I want you all to think of it as a code of conduct. So the Code of Ethics for Educators applies to all licensed educators, educators employed under a waiver from licensure, pre-service teachers, so these would be our students who are in the educational preparation programs and are striving and earning coursework to get their standard license, and then our volunteer coaches now. So what is the impact on the educator? So should a violation or an allegation be brought concerning an incident or a situation, what is the impact on the educator? Well, if you are a licensed educator, it could simply be a letter of caution, it could be a written reprimand, it could be probation, suspension, or it could end in revocation or non-renewal of your license. And then for our educators employed under a waiver, they could receive a letter of caution or levels 1 through 4 notifications. And it could possibly restrict you all from ever receiving a standard license. So we hope that you all never find yourselves in one of these situations. So when does the PLSB actually get involved? Well, an allegation of violation form is received by their office, and it has been signed under penalty of perjury. So something to keep in mind about the allegation form, it cannot be submitted anonymously, and it must have an original or a wet signature. So if a violation is brought against you, it's a very serious occurrence because of those 2 things, which means somebody is putting their name on the line for this with their signature. Afterwards, there will be an authorization by the Ethics Subcommittee, and then a full investigation by the PLSB, and this gives the educator an opportunity to respond to allegations. So, facilitators, now would be a great time to stop this training and kind of discuss, what do we think the average age of an educator is that finds themselves in this sort of situation? And why is it this particular age? So now that we're back, as you all can see, the average age right now is 43 years old. And here's some things you may have discussed in your small groups. Why this particular age? Why is 43 seem to be the average age? Well, we have several things at play. You have educators who are certified both traditionally and alternate pathways. Well, traditionally speaking, if they came out of a program at 22 or 23 years old, straight out of high school into college, by the time they reach 43, they probably been in the education profession for about 20 to 21 years. And sometimes we have educators that get complacent, they get lax in their practices, and that leads to these types of situations. Also, we have to think about how our society has changed in the past 20 years, especially when we talk about the advances of technology and social media. And we know that cell phones have been a pretty common thing in schools before, now that we have our new legislation. But before then, we had students who would bring cell phones into school, and so that instant gratification of notifications and being able to reach out and talk to people in a pretty quick turnaround time has definitely changed over the past 20 years. And then we have the rise of social media. And we're actually going to talk later on in today's training about some social media practices and how we can protect ourselves and our students. So let's move forward to our 8 standards. So this is the Code of Ethics for Arkansas Educators, and we're going to go over each of the 8 standards, and we're going to discuss some guidelines as we interpret what each of these mean. So let's start with Standard 1, which is quite simple. An educator maintains a professional relationship with each student both in and outside of the classroom. And I will give you all a disclaimer that most of the allegations and violations that are brought to PLSB involve Standard 1 and 2. So an educator maintains a professional relationship with each student both inside and outside of the classroom. So here's a little bit of guidance to that we as educators promote at all times the mental, emotional, and physical health and safety of our students. That we show respect for and do not demean, embarrass, or harass students. That we do not participate in bullying. So we just can't let bullying slide and say, kids will be kids. That's part of growing up. And also as professionals, let's not participate in adult bullying either of our colleagues and our peers. Because we must discourage bullying among students. And then we maintain professional relationships with students while using social media. We maintain a positive educator-student authority even while expressing concern, empathy, and encouragement. So let's talk a little bit about communication and social media. And I've recently heard something or read something that said, for a lot of people, cheating on their spouse begins with a conversation, their spouse or their partner. It simply begins with a conversation. Well, a lot of these allegations and violations involve inappropriate conversations and behaviors. And most all of the time, when people get in front of the PLSB board, there's always this disclaimer of, I didn't mean for this to happen, or I didn't expect for it to go that far. So we really have to curtail our conversations with students, that especially those conversations that could be misinterpreted or just not professional. And so here are some things to keep in mind when we talk about the inappropriate behavior. Messaging platforms, this could involve conversations with students, email and text messages. And keep in mind that if you are communicating with students, make sure the communication is always transparent and archivable. And so we have this scale, as you can see, it's a gray scale. And this is the trying to relate to our students versus the relationships with our students, and where educators get into that gray area. On one extreme end of the spectrum, You could have no communications with your students, which isn't exactly ideal either, because we have students who might send us emails concerning school related topics and need help on assignments. You may use approved messaging platforms if you're an educator that does extracurriculars like band or choir, or you may be a coach and you may need to message your team. But make sure if you're doing that, that it is always an approved messaging platform by your school district in their policy. And then to err on the side of caution, I would encourage you to perhaps put an administrator or your athletic director or your department chair in that messaging group with you in that thread to cover yourself. So on one hand, you don't want to have, cut off all communications with students, because we need to communicate with our students. It gets into a gray area when you give students your cell phone number, your personal cell phone number. And I've been a teacher for years, and as children get older, sometimes they lose track of time, space and time, and what's appropriate. And if you give a student your cell phone number, you may open yourself up to receiving messages at what could be deemed an inappropriate time, especially if you have texting a student at 10 p.m. at night. Because then that may lead to a more intimate conversation. And from there, it can go to the extreme where now we have started sending and receiving nude photos. So we've just gone 0 to 100 is completely out of hand. But it starts when we have given a student our personal cell phone number. So I would caution you all on doing this particular practice, and figuring out how you communicate with your students on approved messaging platforms. And when it comes to social media, I would also strongly encourage you all to perhaps do a social media audit. Look at the social media platforms that you are currently using. Are these platforms professional? Do you present yourself as a professional? Because sometimes school districts do background checks by looking at your social media. Are your pictures deemed professional? And if you look throughout the United States right now, there have been several instances outside the state of Arkansas where pictures and conversations with students have been misconstrued because of social media. And so you need to do a social media audit on yourself and see what you have out there. And I would strongly discourage you from friending students and even their parents, because you may post something that a parent might not deem appropriate, and before you know it, it's been taken as a screenshot and it's sent to your administrator. So again, you want to protect yourself, and you always want to put yourself out there as a professional. And so you may need to do an audit on yourself, and do some of these steps as part of best practices. So let's talk a little bit about Standard 2. An educator maintains competence regarding his or her professional practice, inclusive of professional and ethical behavior, skills, knowledge, dispositions, and responsibilities relating to his or her organizational position. Standard 2 guidance. An educator has an obligation to implement best practices and maintain competence in skills and knowledge. And this simply means that as an educator, you are a lifelong learner and you continue to grow in your craft. That you're going to implement the best practices by attending professional developments, that you continue to grow in your skills and your knowledge in your content area. And it's just in your best interest to keep up with what is current, especially since a lot of us are in the profession for many years, and we hope that you have a long career. And so you're going to have to keep up with best practices. The next thing is that you exercise professionalism and competence when interacting with the school community. You remember how we were talking about social media just a minute ago? Well, there are certain community groups that you may be in, that you may be a part of, and they may involve your school community. And my mother used to tell me that everything that you think, you don't have to say. And everything that you read on social media, you don't have to reply to. That you are always a professional. And sometimes we read things on social media and our fingers get to typing really, really good. You always have to remember that you are a professional and that you represent the school even when you're not at the school. Also, the social media policy should be made public and easily accessible on the district webpage. So some districts have specific policies about social media. And I want to tell you all something moving forward, that usually at the beginning of the year, within those first 2 weeks of class, the school district usually gives out forms about children being recorded and photographed. That does not apply to your personal social media pages. So you cannot take pictures of children in your classroom and post them to your personal social media pages. And I caution you about that because number one, the school district is covered from the paperwork. It covers the district. Occasionally, we have students who are in high-risk situations. They may not be able to be photographed. They may be in foster care and they're not allowed to be photographed. And when I think of social media, I think of the chain reaction that sometimes we cause. And I know it is quite common that educators film content perhaps for social media like TikTok. In fact, there was an instance not too long ago where a kindergarten teacher gave her students an assignment and they colored her dress and she filmed the entire thing. The dress was beautiful. But another educator commented and said, hey, I don't think you should be doing this. I can see all of the students' faces. I know their names. I know everything. And she said, it's okay. All the parents signed the paperwork. That does not apply to your personal social media, because people share things, especially when we think we have the best intention about, look what my friend did with her kindergarten class. This is so innovative and it's so creative, and you've shared it and another friend shares it, and now it's gotten to someone's uncle who may not need to have interactions with children, and you've just served those children up on a silver platter, and they now know where that teacher works and who those children are. So we always want to caution ourselves about social media, and we want to always protect our children. So just keep in mind that that paperwork covers the district. It does not cover your personal social media. So here's some standard 2 violation examples. Leaving your class or students unsupervised. Yeah, let's not do that. Let's just say that you just got a limited edition Stanley and you want to show your teacher bestie, and you go across the hallway and you show her that you just got it. It was just released, and look what you got. When you go back across the hallway, little Timmy will have stapled himself to the desk. And when he goes down to the office, he's going to say, well, Mr. Lam left us in the classroom by ourselves. And then surely enough, when they pull up the camera, there you are going across the hallway to your teacher's bestie's class, and you've left them unsupervised. So let's not leave our class and our students unsupervised. Failing to follow any district policies. It's not uncommon for schools to give handbooks to teachers. A lot of times that may just be a building handbook. That may be something about if you get sick with the stomach virus at 5:55 in the morning, who you can put your sick day into, or where you're supposed to be on duty on Mondays and Fridays. You need to read the big district handbook, because failing to follow any of the district policies is a standard 2 violation. And so here are some things that you might want to consider. Let's talk outside employment. There was a teacher in another state who had outside employment by her district, and she was terminated because it was not an approved place for her to work. And so it was in their policy handbook, and she failed to report it, and she was terminated. So any district policies in the big handbook, which should be available online on your district website, you need to read that handbook, annotate it, make notes, and protect yourself and your students. Not following a student's IEP or 504 plan. Both of these documents are crucial for our students with special needs to be successful. And they have specifically outlined guidelines, accommodations, modifications that help them be successful in any classroom. It is a violation if you do not follow the plan. And I know sometimes people are like, well, I give it to them and they don't use them. you need to bring that up when it's time in annual review, but you need to provide it to them. That way, if you need to change something, you can change it, but you need to follow it and make notes. Because what we don't want is for students not to get what they need, and then you deal with a parent who may be a different type of parent. They may know a lot about federal guidelines, laws, regulations, and they will advocate for their students. They certainly will advocate for their students, and they will bring advocates with them. They will bring lawyers with them, and it is a very intimidating situation. So you need to follow a student's IEP and 504 plan, and you need to be communicating regularly with those parents. Failing to keep proper documentation and or records as it relates to student grades. So this is something that is very serious. Number one, we shouldn't be giving fluff grades. You shouldn't be giving out assignments anyway that are just fluffing students' grades. You're giving them full points, and you're not really assessing their learning, because you are supposed to teach and assess learning. When you fail to keep proper documentation, it hurts our students. So a lot of times districts have policies about how often you should be taking grades. Facilitators, this would be a great time to stop this training and talk with teachers about, do they know their district's policy? Now, in small groups, some of you all may have said, well, I'm a secondary teacher, I only need 2 grades per week. Well, that may be quite different in elementary. They may need 1 grade per subject. You need to know the district's policy about grading, and you should be giving assignments and assessments that really assess student learning. Also, you should be doing this frequently. Please don't be one of those teachers that only puts in grades when it's report card or interim time. That's not giving our students feedback on in a timely manner on what they need to improve. Teachers, please ensure that you are keeping proper documentation and or records as it relates to student grades. And what does that look like for you, being an organized professional? Are you giving timely feedback? Are you responding to student questions? These are essential for student learning. Failing to keep proper receipts for school organizations. So you may be one of those extracurricular teachers that may do choir or band, and so this will pertain to you quite frequently, especially our coaches. Also, you may not have been voluntold yet, but you may end up in the future being the assistant dance coach, or you may be the director over the yearbook. When it comes to school organizations, you need to inquire what is the policy about keeping proper receipts, and who do you turn your money into. And I would also strongly caution you all to not keep money in your desk. You need to figure out who you can turn money into before you leave each and every day. Occasionally, we have third-party companies that school districts hire that may come in and do our technology or our floors. We don't want to keep money in our desk. Then that's a liability should it come up missing. So you need to keep proper receipts, and I would also caution you into making copies of everything that you submit. Purposely creating and or providing fraudulent documentation. This is also a Standard 2 violation. Occasionally, some of us write grants for different supplies or different ventures that we carry out for the school district. A lot of times that requires us to turn in evidence of what we have completed. Do not create or provide fraudulent documentation. It's just not a good look. And we definitely don't want something extreme where you're supposed to be buying thousands of dollars of supplies, and then students are saying, well, I only got markers and construction paper. Please ensure that if you are providing documentation, that it is correct. So we've talked about standards 1 and 2. Facilitators, now will be a great time to stop this training and have some conversations in small groups about some takeaways and some things that we plan on doing moving forward in the upcoming school year. Okay, welcome back. Let's look at Standard 3. An educator honestly fulfills reporting obligations associated with professional practices. So here's a little bit of standard 3 guidance. Always keep in mind that you are a mandated reporter. You have to report child abuse as a mandated reporter. And now it's easier than ever because they have an online site that you can actually make reports. You can also still call in, you can still fax, but now it is easier than ever for you in real time to report child abuse. Next, you honestly report data and information to DESE, the Arkansas Legislative Audit, the Arkansas Board of Education, and other state and or federal governmental agencies. And if they are asking you to report data and information, let's be professional and do that in a timely manner. You have to honestly report grades and attendance. Again, with the grading policy, we've already touched on that a little bit, but let's talk about attendance. So a lot of times for elementary school teachers, you may only end up having to take attendance once or twice in a day. Secondary teachers, you have multiple class periods where you have to take attendance. It is crucial that you are taking attendance and that it is accurate. There have been instances where a child has gotten themselves into an adult situation and they were marked present at school and they were allegedly off campus. So it is of the utmost importance that you take attendance correctly, and even marking tardies. Make sure that you all are doing that in real time, because it makes a difference on whether or not a student was present in your class or missing from your class for 5, 10, 15 minutes or upwards. It makes a big difference. That you honestly give information in the recommendation of an individual for employment, promotion, or licensure. You know, occasionally we may be called upon to give recommendations for our peers. Make sure whatever information that you are giving is honest about that person. I mean, we want to see people be open to new opportunities, but you put your professional reputation on the line when you give a recommendation for someone else. And you don't want to give a recommendation and you're praising a person about they're always present, they're always prompt to work, and then this person gets a new job and they're always late. And then they go back and pull, well, who gave a recommendation for this person? And there you are listed, and you have put your professional reputation on the line for that person. So please, please, please give honest, professional information. Also, this includes the failure to timely submit information. This is so crucial. If you as a professional need to set a calendar deadline to make sure it is a timely submission of information, do that, please. Because what you don't want is for someone to say, well, we asked for that information nearly 30 days ago and you just gave it to us. That makes a big difference. So here are some standard 3 violation examples. Falsifying the reporting of grades. Falsifying grant information to obtain money and or equipment fraudulently. Knowingly playing an ineligible player during an athletic event. So this would pertain more so to coaches or administrators, but please be aware that grades make a difference when we talk about the eligibility of players. Falsifying teacher of record. So let's talk about this. When you are a teacher of record, you are certifying that you are teaching a group of students a particular subject or content area, and you are taking attendance and assessing their learning. So if you are not teaching those children, I would not allow them to put me on the schedule as the teacher of record. Make sure that if you are the teacher of record, that you are the one that is teaching those children, assessing their learning, and taking their attendance. Also, falsifying student information so the student will be eligible for scholarships. The opposite is also true. Falsifying student information so that students will be ineligible for scholarships. When it comes to grades, you must give grades that reflect student learning. Falsifying travel reimbursements. So if you are sent to a conference, let's not pay for the whole table of everyone and then turn that in. Okay? Your travel reimbursements should be for you. Also, if you don't have this number locked into your phone, this is the information for the child abuse hotline. We talked about being a mandated reporter. Here is the website we talked about that makes it easier than ever now. It's mandatedreporter.arkansas.gov. Keep in mind that all persons may report reasonable cause to suspect child maltreatment has occurred, a child has died as a result of child maltreatment, you observe a child being subjected to conditions that would reasonably result in child maltreatment. Mandated reporters must report reasonable cause to suspect that a child has been subjected to child maltreatment, died as a result of child maltreatment, died suddenly and unexpectedly, or you observe a child being subjected to conditions or circumstances that would reasonably result in child maltreatment. Also, it would probably be really good to lock this number into your phone. It's 1-800-482-5964. That's the hotline number. And so you are a mandated reporter, you must report. So here are some key points to remember. Contact with your students should be transparent, archivable, and accountable. You need to keep your professional life separate. Keep your personal social media presence personal. This is what we were talking about, cautioning you to befriend students and or their parents on social media. That your communication with a student should always serve an educational purpose. And if you allow students to friend and or follow you on social media, you could be violating your school district's policy and the code of ethics. So facilitators, now would be a great time to stop this training and talk about these key points. And what are some practices that you can put in place in the upcoming school year? All right, standard 4. An educator who is entrusted with public funds and property, including school-sponsored activity funds, honors that trust with honest, responsible stewardship. Here's some standard 4 guidance. Be a good steward of public funds, personnel, and property dedicated to school-related purposes. Use and accounting of resources must comply with state and or federal laws. And the use of resources for personal gain other than incidental personal benefit for which there is no public education purpose would not be in keeping with the intent of this standard. You know, let's talk about this. Sometimes teachers get so comfortable in their classrooms and schools that we just think of this as a second home or an extension of our home. But there's just some things that we cannot do. I would, number one, caution you on using school-related devices for things not school-related. So let's not run our teachers pay teachers side hustle on the school district computer. Let's not do that. You may do wedding planning on the side. Let's not use the copier and the ink in the staff lobby to run programs of the upcoming wedding. You may have Crickets available in your school library. Let's not use those to cut vinyl to run our Etsy shop. Or you may be a person that has access to other buildings. For example, the school gym. It would not be in accordance with this guidance to rent the gym out without your administrator or superintendent knowing and allowing it to be used for a baby shower. So sometimes we just get so comfortable we don't think about how, hey, this isn't school related. So whatever we do, the use of it must be dedicated to school related purposes. Facilitators, now would be a great time to talk about this topic. All right, let's move along to standard 5. An educator maintains integrity regarding the acceptance of gratuity, gifts, compensations, or favors that might impair or appear to influence professional decisions or actions and shall refrain from using the educator's position for personal gain. I always like to think that standards 4 and 5 kind of flow into one another, that they're kind of grouped together. So to me, this is an extension. So here's some guidance about Standard 5. It prohibits conduct which is solely for personal gain and creates an appearance of a conflict of interest. The standard of conduct involves an examination of the total circumstances surrounding the gratuity, the gift, the compensation, or the favor. So a lot of times we have tryouts in the spring for different sports. I would caution you all on accepting gifts from parents. Let's just say that you're the cheer coach and all of a sudden you get a new Stanley Cup from one of the parents of one of the girls trying out for cheer. That kind of creates an appearance of a conflict of interest. Or you may be the basketball coach and one parent has so graciously gifted you a new pair of shoes. Again, it creates an appearance of a conflict of interest. You may have to politely decline. This also involves gifts that sometimes parents will try and gift you money. We cannot accept things like that. For example, you may have an Amazon wish list. A parent may say, hey, I saw your wish list, wasn't able to order. Here's $100, just get what you need off of there. You can't accept things like that. And parents don't usually think about how this could create a bad situation for you, so you have to politely decline and perhaps just give them some guidance on, hey, I can't do that. It could be deemed an ethical violation, but when you get some time, there's no rush. If you want to buy something off of the wish list, that's perfect, that's fine. I'm not looking for anything. The standard of conduct involves an examination of the total circumstances surrounding the gratuity, gift, compensation, or favor. We know that Teacher Appreciation Week is in May. And let me tell you something, elementary school teachers rack up during Teacher Appreciation Week. They have a classroom of 30 kids. They're getting Sonic gift cards and Starbucks gift cards. Secondary teachers be happy with anything you may get. But keep in mind, an examination of the total circumstances. We know that you may get gifts during Teacher Appreciation Week. However, I would caution you all on accepting gifts old school teachers would tell you worth more than $20 or $25. Okay? Now you may get partner gifts. I saw a school district a few years ago. They were a coach partner and every single educator got a new coach backpack. I would have loved that. I would have been so thankful. I probably would have called PLSB and said, hey, before I get too comfortable and put my little trinkets on this, can I keep this? But it was a partner donation and everyone got one. And so again, you want to make sure that it does not create an appearance of conflict of interest, but sometimes school districts have wonderful community partners and we love them for that. But if you are worried, I would defer to my administrator, my superintendent, or I would call PLSB. Standard 6. An educator keeps in confidence secure standardized test materials and results and maintains integrity regarding test administration procedures. I'm sure you all have seen news stories from all around the country regarding standardized test materials and situations in which educators were not always truthful and forthcoming with their procedures. So luckily, most districts before standardized testing season will have a test prep review and guidance for teachers to remind them on how to conduct themselves when there is actual testing in place. Keep in mind that you must maintain the confidentiality of all those parts of the test. This is why school districts have specific procedures when it comes to standardized testing season. All right, Standard 7. An educator maintains the confidentiality of information about students and colleagues obtained in the course of the educator's professional services that is protected under state law or regulations, federal law or regulations, or the written policies of the educator's school district, unless disclosure serves a professional purpose as allowed or required by law or regulations. So here's a little bit of guidance regarding Standard 7. We know that as an educator, you all have access to a lot of confidential information. So educators have access to confidential information and must maintain that confidence unless the disclosure serves a legitimate education purpose as allowed or required by law. And when we talk about the confidential information, you may have students that are in foster care. You may have students who are in ongoing court proceedings. You may have students who have special needs. All of these things are confidential information. Now, confidential student information may include student academic and disciplinary records, health and medical information, family status and or income, and assessment or testing results. So here's a little bit about that. Student academic and disciplinary records may be necessary for you all to discuss if you're in a team meeting. How can we improve a student's academic performance? You may need to discuss these things, and you can as long as it serves a legitimate education purpose. In other words, you can't gossip about children. And it needs to be information shared in a professional setting. I would strongly discourage you on having this type of information and discussions in the teacher's lounge or the staff lounge, because not everybody in that lounge may be a teacher or educator. We have substitutes. We have parents that volunteer for PTA, and we just cannot release this information. So let me bring up a point. Teachers, you may get sick. You may have a sub binder that you have provided need-to-know information to a substitute. What you don't want to happen while you're at home with a fever or the stomach virus is for a substitute to go through your drawers and then read a student's IEP out loud and make derogatory comments about, oh, you have ADHD, that's why you act that way. We don't want that to happen. You should have IEPs and 504s in a secure place to begin with. But that type of information is not to be shared to a substitute or the entire class. But you may have to put in medical information into sub-plans that are beneficial for your students or for a student. For example, if you have a child who has a severe allergy, you may want to leave information about students are not allowed to eat in my classroom because we have students with severe allergies. You don't have to say which student it is, what the allergy is, but you can make a blanket statement to cover your students. Some schools have policies regarding bathroom privileges. You may have a child that has renal failure. They may need to have unlimited bathroom access. You probably need to leave that. Timmy may have unlimited bathroom privileges. You don't have to say why. But again, you still, even when you're not on campus, you need to protect your students. And sometimes you have to share general information. I would caution you all on those taking up free and reduced lunch forms, because that may actually reveal family status or income to other students. And we know we can't share assessment and testing results, although I would be super proud if all my kids in the class got 100 on my 50 states quiz. Now, I may want to brag about that all of them got a 100 on it, but we can't share assessment and testing results. Facilitators, now would be a great time to talk about Standard 7. All right, let's talk about Standard 8 and some guidance regarding this. An educator, while on school premises or at school-sponsored activities involving students, refrains from using, possessing, and or being under the influence of alcohol or unauthorized drugs and substances, and or possessing items prohibited by law. Possessing or using tobacco or tobacco-related products, including e-cigarettes, e-liquid, or vapor products. And then finally, abusing or misusing prescription medications or other authorized substances as evidenced by impairment while on school premises or at school-sponsored activities involving students. You may volunteer to be the quiz bowl judge. I would strongly discourage you from going to brunch with your friends beforehand and having adult beverages and then going to that school sponsored activity, because technically that is an ethical violation. You may have gone to the dentist and they gave you the good prescription drugs for your root canal. If you have the prescription, and you cannot operate a motor vehicle, you probably shouldn't be at school using that particular prescription. So some of the way we conduct ourselves as a professional has to do with what we do in our personal time that may spill over into our professional time. So you cannot be on school premises under the influence. I would also caution you all from having any of these materials in your vehicles, especially secondary teachers, because sometimes we share a parking lot with students. Sometimes people walk through and pull doors. So I would not have them in my vehicle on school grounds. Let's not do that. Best practices. Facilitators, now would be a great time to talk about Standard 8. All right. Now is the time in our training where we talk about some real life case examples involving the Code of Ethics for Arkansas educators. Classroom teachers. Unfortunately, there was a situation where an educator told an off-color joke, and that not professional at all. We have an instance where an educator yelled at both students and teachers. An educator had an inappropriate relationship with a parent. An educator failed to follow district policies for inputting of grades. An educator took advantage of the graduation date. And I think this pertains to graduation happened and you're no longer my student. An educator posted TikToks. So now would be a great time to talk about some of these examples and what these teachers could have done instead. What's some better decisions that they could have made? All right, let's talk about some case examples with administrators and coaches. An administrator failed to report child abuse. I will say, when you fail to report child abuse, in my mind, that just means that the child abuse is continuing to happen and we have failed our child. An administrator revealed confidential information about employees. A coach verbally bullied and demeaned players. A coach left very young children unsupervised. A coach was under the influence of alcohol. Facilitators, now would be a great time to stop and talk about this and talk about some things that could have been done differently. Special education case examples. Educators teaching special education. We had an incident where a student was dragged across the classroom. A student was dumped out of her seat. Locked a student in a dark bathroom as punishment. Falsified documentation. Came to work high and then interacted with teachers and students. Forged several documents. Again, facilitators, now would be a great place to talk about what we are at the end of our training, and there are some things that I would love for you all to keep in mind as you move forward into your next school year. Number one, as you conduct yourself as a professional, keep in mind that you may be recorded or filmed at any given point. And if you are too embarrassed by some of your actions for your mother or your pastor or someone else to see it, then you probably shouldn't conduct yourself in that manner. Also, a lot of these situations, there were steps that occurred before that could have been done differently. So let's work on identifying how we can make real-time good decisions when it comes to our students. I will say, if you look across social media, you will see instances of teachers in other states who have made some bad decisions. There was a coach who was filmed by a parent during football practice for a week, where she just recorded things that the coach has said to players over and over again for a week. Remember that you are always a professional, both inside and outside of the classroom. And the way you conduct yourself when you leave that job makes a difference. It may violate a school district policy. There are just some things that we need to do and some best practices when it comes to social media. I would strongly encourage you all, again, to do that social media audit, especially now that AI is so sophisticated. You need to protect yourself. You need to protect your students by not posting them. There are just some things that you need to do as an educator. If you have any questions, here's the contact information for Whitney James. She is the managing attorney at PLSB, and our chief investigator, Sarah Banker. Here's their contact information. You may call or email them if you have further questions. Also, at the end of this training, I will show you all where you can find the allegation form. You can find a review of the Code of Ethics, and where you can read up on further ethics trainings.